seemingly the rapid test worked just as fine with that. The performance is still hovering about 80%, which has not changed from before. As a reminder about that, so you're aware of it, if you do one test, you have 20% chance of the test being false negative if you're having an actual COVID. So remember that and make sure you do serial tests. Of course, first positive test is adequate because the specificity is very high. It's not 100%, but it's close. So if you have symptoms, run the first test as soon as you feel the symptoms. If that first test is negative, repeat the test 24 hours later. So that's seemingly the current best recommendation. If the 2 tests are negative, you're probably okay to claim that it's not COVID. Whether or not it makes sense to check the 3rd test probably depends on the symptoms and sort of what's happening. All right, so the second not such a good thing is it does seem like it's a bit more virulent than the prior form of Omicron. We are starting to see mortality going up steadily across most of the states. I mean, of course, it's expected since the holidays brought up more cases and the mortality is lagging a little bit by 2 to 3 weeks usually. So, it's probably partially that. I don't have any updates on the therapeutics for XBB 1.5, the vaccines you've heard. It's the one strain that seems to be evading vaccines the best so far. So whatever the boosters you've had, even if you had a bivalent booster, don't expect that it'll protect you from getting it. It will protect you from getting a serious illness, but it won't prevent you from getting from picking up something, picking up mild case. Okay, so second update, there seems to be a data now coming out, which I'm not going to put studies on, but it does say that we are seeing decrease in long COVID cases with the Omicron, which is a great news. It's definitely reflective of my own experience in the clinical settings. Out of probably, let's say, 100 patients I've had with acute COVID in the last 6 months, for example, since the Omicron became dominant, honestly, I may have only 1 or 2 patients who are still having symptoms. So we're definitely seeing a much lower risk of long COVID, at least, well, definitely with the care that we're going to talk about in a few minutes, but also probably just in general, and the study seems to confirm that. Okay, a couple other really big things while I'm waiting for questions. It's winter. If you have a central air, especially if you have a forced air, if you have a wood stove, or if you have any kind of stove that generates direct heat right in your floor, in one of your floors, please get humidifiers. There's so many symptoms that can be minimized or avoided by use of humidifiers right now, especially in the cold when the temperatures drop below 0, because the air gets quite dry. If you suddenly, you've never had it, but now you're having the sneezing, coughing, whatever, congestion in the morning, it's probably because the air is too dry for you. I am a big fan of not trying to put massive humidifiers for the whole place. It's a waste of resources. Most of the time, what you want to do is you want to put a relatively small, probably no more than a liter size humidifier right next to your bed. That's probably the best. Unless you have a system where you can humidify the entering air. Some systems are now allowing that, certain types of brand new heating systems. But frankly, I don't think you need to even do that complicated. The typical humidifier that I'm thinking about, you can get them for $25, $30 on Amazon, and they're pretty easy to operate. You just fill them up with water, hit the push button, and they tend to work for 10 to 12 hours and relatively easy to upkeep. Okay, so that's a second thing. I actually find it quite important because just in the last couple of weeks, I've had probably half a dozen of patients come in with all the kind of a congestion symptoms that were not recovering after acute cold or just suddenly appearing, and turns out it's just all dryness. So don't forget, such a simple thing, easy to do, and often people forget that. Okay, all right. So since there was at least 3 people who wanted to go back and look at the acute COVID treatment, so let me pull up the slides. I don't see any questions. I'm just saying. But let me just get the slides up 1 second. All right. Benita, you having hand because you have a question?
Well, more like a comment. Chat is disabled.
Chat is disabled. What can we do about it? That's why nobody's posting anything.
Sorry, let me go in there. Let me go in there
Ah.
and fix it.
Someone had to be the one to say it, so I decided to be the one to say it.
Yeah, if you
Okay,
wouldn't have
there
said
you
it, I had
go.
no idea. I can't. I don't have the view of that.
Remember, folks, it's Zoom, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it does weird things.
I did have a question though regarding COVID. Question.
Yeah.
If you receive a notification of an exposure and or you know that you may actually have been exposed to someone recently, how many days of isolation are we supposed to be in again?
You don't need to isolate for the exposure. It doesn't make any sense at the moment. You need to isolate only when you potentially can become infectious. And you're not going to get infectious until beginning of symptoms. I mean, you may get infectious a little bit before that, but it's probably not critical. So I wouldn't really worry too much about it. Now, if you know that exposure was very heavy, and you're very concerned, you probably can isolate just for a couple of days, probably 2 or 3 days. I bet there are specific CDC recs on this, but I don't actually know what they are exactly. If anybody cares and wants to go to CDC and take a look, that's fine. But I don't tell people isolate routinely if they've been exposed. Just watch for, and testing. Thank you very much. You can definitely test, and you probably can test. This is a good time to test multiple times, because if you don't have symptoms, the false negative rates are way higher. So, and the test's not even designed to be used for asymptomatic situations, but you probably can just do tests once a day for 2 or 3 days, and if they're all negative, you're done.
I had another question, if I may. What was the supplements that you were recommending? I think I've forgotten that one too.
It's coming.
Yes.
It's coming.
Thank you.
It's part of today's thing.
Perfect. Thank you.
I want to do the questions first, and then because usually that's how we do since I'm doing both questions and the wellness talk today. Okay, let's do, Salome has a hand up, so let's, Salome, go and then their question.
Okay. Well, it's clarification about long COVID, the study you did. Does that mean people are not, whoever gets COVID now, it's not turning into long COVID? Is that what it's?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Okay. It's seemingly that the risk of long COVID with Omicron went down quite a bit.
Okay.
It didn't go. So the previous thinking that the numbers were sitting between 10 to 20% for the prior variants. I'm guessing that after about next 6 months or so, when the data will be accumulated enough, we'll probably see that risk is probably halved. That's my prediction. So we're going to see somewhere between 5 to 10% risk at the most, maybe even less. So that's a good news.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay. All right, not a COVID question, but wanted to know what you think about the gas stove study linked to asthma. Yeah, so honestly, that's an interesting question. I actually would love to talk about it. We are having an argument in our house, and it's not going well. So we both of our houses, the vacation home where I am today and the main one, have the kind of a standard, reasonably okay gas stoves. Both the top, well, actually, here in the cabin, the oven is the electric, but the top, the burners are gas. And I want to replace all of this. I actually strongly believe that nobody should be using gas inside the house, burning openly, because of some data. And I'm not even worried about asthma as much. I'm worried about long-term toxicity of burning and basically utilizing oxygen for burn versus it's very different if you're using electric, because obviously there's no open flames and there's no consumption of oxygen, and there's no risk of any kind of exposure to any toxins. Gas itself is reasonably clean, but it's not 100% clean. Plus when things get when there's a direct fire, it tends to burn up residue on pans, etc. So there's some exposure, and there's been increased awareness of this. There is some push, especially in Europe, to try to get rid of the natural gas for the cooking. Problem that I have in my house, I have two cooks that are, well, three cooks at grandma, like serious cooks, especially one is potentially going to be a professional chef, and for them that's a touchy feeling. They're like, cooking on electricity, it's a poor man's choice, right? Because the heat rises differently. So I don't know what we're going to do. I think we're going to probably keep the gas in the main house and then switch here to the electric. There's also some practical reasons we have to replace the stove here anyway. Al, is that in line with what you were asking, more or less? But that's my opinion. I mean, I think the data on asthma is controversial, actually. There's some data, I agree, but okay. I have contractors remodeling a bath in my condo. Are there any precautions since they don't? Well, I mean, that's a little easier. You're probably not going to be in their way while they're there, and they're going to be coming in and out. I would just keep out of the way, and if you're interacting with them, you can wear a mask. I think it's relatively low risk situation because there's only a couple of people. It's not like a crowd. You can ask them how they feel and make sure they are symptomatic, so that's going to decrease risk of you getting sick. But also just stay out of their way. And I don't think you also need to. You can, after they leave, you may just keep going there for a couple hours. But the reality is that the risk is probably quite small in this situation. It's a good question. Is there a way to copy, download materials from the chat? Yeah, I think there is. There should be if you look at the right, where the chat is, when you can type something, you see there's this 3 buttons. Okay. Like 3 dots. The button.
If you're, excuse me, Misha, if you're unable to do that, it's because you don't have host rights.
Oh yeah, even I cannot save anything. Good point.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys want me to start putting the chats in the share folders, I can do that. But what I try to do is go through the chat and pull the links that I think are of interest to you and include them in the email. But put in the chat what y'all would prefer.
It's gonna be very disjointed. That's fine. Yeah, I wouldn't save and put it in every big recording because it's just gonna be kind of all over the place.
Perhaps just the major links.
Yeah, that's what yeah, major links I think Janet always putting in, and maybe if you guys have any specific thing you want us to add, maybe you can put that in the chat too so that we can capture that. How's that works? Okay. This is just a comment. I have liked having a gas stove for cooking, but I'm concerned now. Right. Yeah, so I think there's an increased number of people who are concerned about that. Exhausts are not going to work completely. They're very partial. You'd be shocked to know that, for example, wood burning stoves that are high-end and fully sealed, when you close the door, they're actually way safer because they pull air through the house outside, and there is no any kind of exposure of exhaust into the house. It's actually all evaporating, and actually in some ways that equipment cleaning, because it actually removes the air from inside, pulls it up into the chimney, and you have a little bit of air coming from outside into the house through cracks and whatnot. So it may not be great for environment overall, but again, any heating to some degree, unless your heating is electric and renewable, anything else, there's going to be some environmental impact. So that's another thing, right? So if you're burning natural gas, you're also burning a natural resource, versus if you have an electric stove and you're fully renewable, which, in one house we're 100% renewable, in the other one we're probably going to put the panels on soon. But again, that's also extra expense. So you have to balance all these things. Okay, I don't see any more questions for today. And we kind of deviated from the typical topic. So let me walk through the supplements and the acute COVID management. So I'm going to share my screen.
Misha, that's okay because you're supposed to be doing the Q&A and the wellness talk.
I know.
Okay.
That's why I'm on it.
Okay.
It's 2:20. I want to make sure I have about 10 minutes because I'm sure there's going to be questions here. And I see Benita, is that still hand up, or you have another question, or is that just hand up? Probably just hand up. Okay. No hand up. Okay, good. Okay, so this is what I showed you last time. Nothing really changed here, so I just want to leave this on for a while. So a couple of things. If you know your vitamin D levels are very good, you don't really have to take very massive doses of 50,000 a day. This is more if there is a deficiency present. If you are having a normal vitamin D level, you can just make sure you take some vitamin D daily. I generally recommend just 5,000 units. Now, quercetin, if you look at the products out there, most of them will have 100 to 200 milligrams. So getting a 500 to 1,000 milligram twice daily is not going to be all that easy. So you'll have to find a product that's relatively concentrated. The products that I prefer, I'll show you in a couple of minutes on the last slide, you'll see, because I kind of like to combine quercetin and turmeric, and also boswellia, and sometimes even boswellia and bromelain. So those are kind of, to me, they're those 4 large flavonoids that I like to use in most of the acute and chronic inflammatory states. Okay, so zinc, 50 to 100 milligrams. The reason you have 30 here, don't worry about citrate, it probably doesn't really matter. But the reason you have 30 milligrams, because this is the most common form that you can easily find in a store. So you're going to have a hard time finding 50 and 100 milligram capsules. Those generally have to be ordered from like a online professional dispensary, full script, well-await, whatever. Vitamin C, if you believe in the liposomal, if you have access to good liposomal, you don't have to take this much, because you'll probably be just fine with something like 200 to 300 milligrams of liposomal, since absorption is a little bit higher. If not, if you're using regular vitamin C, this is the dose. I tend to also think that for people who have very sensitive digestive tract, even 1,000 can start triggering diarrhea when you take it a few times a day. So you may want to take 500. The saturation point begins at around 250 milligrams. What I mean by that, when you take 0 to 250, all of it goes in and all of it raises the level. Once you cross 250 of vitamin C, additional dosing raises the level very little. There is still a reason to keep taking more, because there's still an uptick up, but it's relatively small. The largest bang for the buck is the first 250 milligrams. So if you have 500 milligrams capsules and you're sensitive, just take 1 capsule with every meal. Very simple logic to remember. So this way you'll get 1 gram to 1.5 grams, depending how many meals you have. But if you can tolerate more, take more. And I have people who take even 5 grams twice a day. If you take 3 meals and you rather split it over more meals, that's perfectly fine. Okay, I'm gonna keep a look at the chat too, just make sure. Okay, what do NAC and NAD stand for? Okay, I'll explain that when I'll get there in a sec. So the vitamin list is for only if you have COVID. Right, this is for acute COVID. Very good question. For prophylaxis, none of this is really required at these doses. This is very high doses if you pay attention, right? Especially like quercetin prophylactically, not really. Quercetin is a very good acute treatment. As prophylactic, not really. For vitamin D, you just want to keep the level somewhere, let's say between 40 to 60. That would probably be the most optimal level. Zinc, prophylactically, you just want to make sure you take some zinc. A lot of multivitamins will have some zinc. So maybe 20-30 milligrams of zinc is a good daily dose prophylactically. Yeah, ester C, yeah, the one way to get away from the acidity of C is to use a buffered forms. Some people tolerate the buffered forms a lot better, so you can do that. And let's see if there's other questions. No, quercetin exists often in capsules, so I think Cecile. And by the way, if anybody needs particular recs, like you need me to, you can message me. I probably can just send you, if you have a particular question, I can probably set that up for you. Especially if you're already my patient, it would be easier for me just to send a specific product for you if you have a specific question. Okay, NAC stands for N-acetylcysteine, and the NAC is a very common way of saying it. It's an amino acid, comes in a lot of foods, high in whey protein, high in any animal proteins, much lower in pea protein or any other plant-based proteins, but there's still some. It's a natural precursor to glutathione, but it's also on itself is very potent antioxidant, and more importantly, it is a scavenger. So it both NAC and the glutathione, which is precursor, NAC is precursor to glutathione, will indeed um, um, scavenge the free radicals and detox you. So when you have the massive inflammatory response, one of the key options is not just to dampen it, but also to map up the garbage that's generated. Remember, inflammation causes garbage, a lot of it. The stronger the inflammatory response, the more garbage in the system. So in order to map it up, this is one of the universal methods. There are others, but this is the easiest one and most effective in many ways. Okay, there's a question about silver nasal spray. Yeah, I think that's good. You can definitely use it. It wouldn't treat anything once the viral is systemic, right? Question is, would it be effective prophylactically? There's been some data on that. I think it's totally worth using if you like it. And don't worry about overdosing it, because most of those are actually very low dose of silver. What I would not do is to take massive oral doses of silver during the acute COVID. If you believe in it and you're taking silver homeopathically, or you're going to take some of it and not very high doses for a couple of days, by all means. And silver does have some data. Silver is a very potent antibacterial, antimicrobial. So there is definitely some potential use of it. The reason you're not seeing it here, that's a little hard to recommend on a universal basis for a couple of reasons. So one, most of things on this list people tolerate very well, easy to obtain, and you can overdose if you take crazy doses. With silver, the problem is you have to know precise products, and you also need to know how to exactly take it. And so that creates a little bit of a challenge. Zinc is probably better for chronic infections in some ways, but it definitely can be okay for. Now, so no, oral is not even close to intravenous. The problem with intravenous, you can imagine during acute COVID, you can't get it, and it's way more expensive. And frankly, biggest problems with IV, it's not even the cost, because the glutathione is a critical aspect of system. It has to be taken in on a very regular basis, very frequently. Taking it once a week, it's okay when you're doing some chronic detox, but it's definitely not going to address acute COVID, right? So you have to take a smaller doses, but on a regular basis. Yeah, the doses are listed for everything. Now, the reason a glutathione dose is not given is because it depends on what product you're using. So if it's a liposomal, something like Quicksilver, you would be okay with 100 to 200 milligrams of glutathione. If you're taking Certia, which is the standard brand, which is sold in capsules, which is not liposomal, you'd probably need close to 500 milligrams a day. It's much poorer absorbed, so you'll have to bypass that. Turmeric, so 1,000 twice a day is a pretty high dose, but that's presumed on average turmeric. If you have something like high concentrate, for example, Miriva, you can probably get away with 500 milligrams twice a day because it's more concentrated. Or if you have one of those more advanced products like Pro Curcuma from Integrative Therapeutics and others. But again, the problem with me giving you specifics for any of these products, they are dependent on what the brand is and what is the concentration of an extract. So I can't just kind of give you a blank statement. If you like to take turmeric as a food, by the way, you can take a teaspoon twice a day. That would be a lot of turmeric, and it'll probably be more than 1,000 milligrams of extract. It'll probably be closer to 2 grams of twice a day, which is great. Now, the only reason I'm putting the NR, nicotinamide riboside, or NMN, nicotinamide mononucleotide as NAD Gold Plus. Because one of the biggest things we know, it's seemingly if you take this product during acute COVID, this is maybe one of the main reasons I'm seeing almost no long COVID. The problem with long COVID, in my opinion, in addition to just the fact that the nervous system gets just derailed, the biggest thing is mitochondrial function. This product tends to boost mitochondrial function very quickly. The reason I like NAD over nicotinamide riboside for COVID is the rate of absorption. NR has to be taken orally. It's going through the liver. It takes time to get absorbed. NAD spray under the tongue is very rapid, and you can use it very frequently. You can use it 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day if you feel down, if your energy is dropping. And you're using that, and actually people tell me frequently they feel immediately better. Like there's a sudden energy boost within 20 to 30 minutes, especially when you're feeling down energetically. So, okay, when you do. Okay, so quercetin is anti-inflammatory. Vitamin D, there's a strong belief that when you have an acute infection, you're utilizing massive amounts of vitamin D. It has to do with the fact that D is not a vitamin, but a hormone, and it's required for regulatory aspect of the immune system. So it's getting utilized. Zinc and vitamin C are direct antivirals. Zinc is built into the way our system defends ourselves. It's a critical aspect of the partial defense mechanism. C is also upregulates lymphocytes. So C at the very high dose, like intravenous vitamin C, becomes the chemotherapeutic drug. So it actually kills pretty much everything. Cancer cells, viruses, bacteria. It kills anything that does not have something called catalase, which is an enzyme that breaks hydrogen peroxide. With this doses, you're not going to get to that level. So you're just going to get the modulation of lymphocytes, which is still important. NAC and glutathione are MAPs, right? So they remove the natural garbage. Turmeric is anti-inflammatory. NAD really supports the mitochondria. It tends to boost up the energetic state, so you don't get too long COVID. Nothing will, if you're doing well and you're not really down energetically, you may not even need this product. It's not cheap. But it is an important part of overall, like especially since most people will end up with some fatigability during acute COVID. That's why I'm giving it as a core package, not as a sidekick. All right, I got to finish up because I'm at the 32 minutes, so I'll take 2 more minutes to finish this up. There's a whole bunch of other things here. So boswellia and bromelain, I mentioned already, they're very potent anti-inflammatory. I tend to combine them. So there's 2 of my favorites, BCQ and DHIST. These ones are also quite good. Curcumax Pro, I kind of mentioned, but that's a pure turmeric, but very concentrated. Omega-3 fatty acids, especially if you're taking a low dose of omega-3s and you're not eating a lot of high omega-3 foods, you may consider that. Melatonin is excellent, not for sleep. Remember, high dose melatonin is very potent antioxidant. I'm not putting it for the first line of treatment, but that one, if I were to add something to the first line, I'd put the melatonin there, just because it's problem with melatonin, you have to get to the dose of 10 milligrams ideally, and that's a little hard to do. So much lower doses are probably just not going to be as effective as the higher doses. Selenium, hopefully, we tend to store for at least a week or 2, so we have some storage. So if you have a multivitamin that has selenium, or that you have some other, you probably don't really need it for a couple of days, but it's a really good add-on if you feel like you want to do more. EGCG does not have to be EGCG. This is an extract from green tea. If you like your matcha green tea, a teaspoon a day would give you this amount of EGCG. It'll probably give you, well, it won't give you a gram. It'll give you 500 milligrams of EGCG, the teaspoon of matcha. This is Dr. Sarah's favorite antiviral. There are lots of products like this out there. I don't think I'm going to go discuss this in huge detail. I can give a whole lecture on herbs for acute infections. This is just one of many. I'm a huge fan of this molecule, of this herb or plant, astragalus, which is a very potent optimizer of the, it basically helps to recover. it's not necessarily an immune booster. It's a adaptogen that helps us to get over acute infections. And I think that's it. That's not really worth covering again. Although I think we had somebody talk about homeopathics for the acute COVID. And with that, I'm gonna end this part. Check the chat. What about 1 or 2? Yeah, that's fine. So each Brazil nut is about 70 milligrams of the selenium. So if you take 2, you get about 150. Get 3, you get about 200. So absolutely, yeah. Just make sure you don't do that for a very long time, right? I mean, you can totally overdose on Brazil nuts if you take, say, 4 or 5 and you take for a long time. So can people who have pineapple sensitivity? Yes, absolutely. Most of the pineapple allergy has nothing to do with bromelain. Bromelain is a protein, it's an enzyme, but it's very unusual to be allergic to it. Most people are not allergic to that. They're allergic to other parts of pineapple. Great question, though. I like how some of you guys think. Can you substitute sublingual vitamin B for something like NAD? Not really. Right, there's different mechanism of action. I personally take vitamin B high dose whenever I feel run down. I didn't put that in there because it's kind of self-explanatory. It's not really part of a standard of like COVID care. It should be part of your constitutional care. If you feel you need more vitamin B vitamins, then you should have more B vitamins. But it's not the same. The NAD boosting, whether it's NMN or NR, nicotinamide mononucleotide, or nicotinamide riboside, that's a direct precursor to NAD. So it's a direct precursor to what we're supposed to do with our own mitochondria. So mitochondria produces NAD. That's the fuel in the tank. So if you're running on empty because COVID showed up and took a passenger seats in your car, you gotta boost that up, and that's just universal way. Now, of course, this is where the intravenous would be by far the best. So unfortunately, that's not affordable by 90% of people. Thanks, everybody. Sorry, I'm taking a couple extra minutes. Ilana, I hope that's okay. It's wonderful to have you back. Always love you, and always love your background. And you always look so much better now. Every time you show up, I feel underdressed, but that's okay. That's
not at all. Oh, thank you so much. I'm so glad to be back here again with you all. And I don't know, I'm just wearing like what feels cozy and comfortable for me today, which is my sweater, and then it's just like another sweater on top of it. But to bring along a little bit of nature in another way, I've got this necklace with little seashells on it. And one of the things I wanted to mention, well, I'll just say again for anyone who is joining in, it's the first time you may have seen me, or if it's the 4th time. My name's Ilana Rubin, and I am a certified nature and forest therapy guide and the founder of Kindred Nature. That's my practice based out of Northern Virginia, the land of the Piscataway indigenous peoples. And I do offer these experiences for longer, up to 3 hours at a time, outdoors, or it could be in a small space, in a large space, or guided from indoors. And again, today I'll be guiding us through a little bit of a sample of that. So maybe familiar with just a little bit of variations from what we've done before. And yeah, so something I wanted to bring up, just talking about the season that we're in. You know, if you're all in the same part of the world as I am, I know sometimes we have someone from another part, but for me here and for many of us, it's winter. And I hear sometimes from folks, and I don't know if this is what you think or not, that's fine either way. But sometimes I hear from people that like they don't want to be outside or connect with nature so much during winter. It's cold or it's wet and it feels uncomfortable, or you have to bundle up and do these different steps. So I just wanted to share some different like observations and ideas of different ways of connecting with nature in winter beyond just bundling up and going outside, which I really encourage people to do. There's no substitution for that. But if that's not what you're feeling in the moment, or if it's not an option for you, this is a really great time to dig into like where you are, the places that you already are, and find what are the bits of nature there. And if you haven't already done this from some of our sessions before, I really encourage you to take some time later on to do this, or maybe even during this time. I spent a little time before the session today just looking around to seeing like, what else can I find in my own home that I haven't thought about before? I looked in the kitchen and there's so much, especially seeds. Like I've got this jar of chickpeas or garbanzo beans, and like, so this is something that, you know, grow a whole new plant. And then from like the end of the year that just passed, I know for some people it's a tradition to eat different nuts or to get like a whole bowl of nuts. So maybe you've got nuts or nut shells, and these are all like different textures and things you can explore. You could like shake them around and play around and make fun sounds with all that. Outside, we usually think of fall as the time for leaves to be falling. And last time I showed you a bunch of leaves that I found from outside, but there's still leaves around on the ground unless they've been blown away in some way. And then also from my kitchen, I found like there's some coffee beans, because I actually don't drink coffee, but someone else in my household does. So, you know, that's some bits of, I can hold these up here too. Little coffee beans or coffee grounds, sunflower seeds for snacking on. But like seeds, I think of oftentimes for like spring and summer, but all of this is still here during other times of year. And so many other ideas too. I mean, like with the seashells right here. One of my favorite times to visit the beach or to go to the edge of some body of water is actually in the winter. That's sometimes like one of the greatest times for me to explore shells, if that happens to be something you like that you want to explore, because there might be fewer people there. If it's normally busy during the summer, if you go in the winter, you might find all these great ones. So like last winter, right around this time of year, I went with my partner and we found like the biggest whelk shells out at Assateague, and there was nobody else out there picking up these shells, and they're just so beautiful. You can also do that whole thing of like listening to the sounds, or, you know, knocking on them, seeing what that sounds like. And then there's of course like house plants, or you know, bringing other things into your space. So, and images, listening to nature sounds, finding pictures or making art. So there's just so many different things that we can still do, even if in the moment you may or may not feel like getting outside in the elements. So with all that said, we can dive into, I guess I'll just shorten it up a little bit today, given the time, and that's all good. But we will just move into arriving into the space where you are and getting comfortable. We're going to do the invitation of pleasures of presence to awaken our senses. So just take a moment to look around the space where you are and just see what's here in all the different directions. Maybe there's different textures or colors that you're noticing. And then whenever you feel ready, you might like to either close your eyes or soften or lower your gaze. And take a few gentle breaths in whatever way feels right for you. To settle into this comfortable place where you are. And then noticing what sounds or perhaps quietness do you notice where you are. I wonder if there are any sounds that are different at this time of year, or if it sounds the same where you are. What's the loudest sound that you notice? And what is the quietest? And shifting your attention to the feelings in your own body, taking another breath at your own pace. And feeling what it's like to have a body and to be in your body in this moment. Leaning into anything that might be physically supporting you right now, allowing your body to relax into that support. And imagining what it might be like if you were another kind of being of nature. What would that feel like if you were maybe a tree or another plant or another animal, fungi, water or soil? Imagine whatever you would like. How might you interact with the place around you as that nature being? Now coming back, shifting our attention to our sense of smell or the sensations of breathing through your nose. What do you notice with your nose in this place? Do you try tilting your head in different directions? Does it feel different, sniffing or breathing with your nose? I wonder if the air smells or feels different if you perhaps put your hands near to your nose or put your nose near something else and see what that's like. If you have your hands together, perhaps just exploring what your own skin feels like, or bringing your hands together or to touch something, some textures that are near you. Tuning into that sense of touch. Now bringing your attention to our mouth. Taking some breaths at your own pace through your mouth. I wonder if there's any sensations you notice on your tongue or on your lips. Perhaps a temperature or movement of the air, stillness, dryness or moisture, or maybe a taste. And just tuning into how you are feeling, how your body is feeling overall, listening if there's anything your body's asking you for, recalling that you're also part of nature and that you are welcome to give to yourself and to your body whatever feels supportive and comfortable in this moment, in this place. And in a moment, but not just yet, we will open our eyes or refocus our gaze. When you do, you might imagine that what you see is something that was all created as a kind of a gift for you. So whenever you're ready, slowly open your eyes or lift and focus your gaze. Just notice whatever catches your attention. Noticing if there's anything that's in motion or shows a sign of movement or motion that has happened in the past, or perhaps a sign of motion that will happen in the future. Just take a moment to notice motion or signs of motion, or perhaps stillness. Now we will come back together as a group. We will do another invitation, but before that, I'd like to welcome if anyone wants to share in the chat or by unmuting. What are you noticing? So we'll just hold for a moment for anyone who would like to share either in the chat or on audio. What are you noticing? And while we're giving time for people to write in, I'll just show some of the different little bits of the nuts that I have from eating, and also different shells and holes of nuts that I found outside too. This is one actually from much farther away. Very fuzzy and soft on the inside, but much rougher on the outside. Well, anyone can share. What are you noticing if you like? I'm noticing the scenic views outside my windows. Thank you, Ayla. This one is one from outside. All right. Thank you to those who shared, and we'll do, just keeping in mind time. Let's see. Oh, I see. I'm watching branches from the trees moving in the wind. Thank you, Judy. I'm noticing I got cloudy. Might have missed my chance to get some vitamin D. Thank you, Al. So now, to give us this short invitation called sound finding. Sound finding. So for this, welcome you to explore the sounds of nature near you. Perhaps that will mean making some of the sounds yourself with your voice or with your body. Perhaps it will be finding bits of nature around you, whether that's piece of wood furniture or opening a window to listen outside, or finding seeds in your kitchen that you can shake around, or something else entirely, or a memory of sounds in nature. So for sound finding, I'll give us all 2 minutes. I will turn off my video for 2 minutes, and then I'll hum or sing us back after 2 minutes. So take 2 minutes sound finding to explore sounds with nature around you. Now we will come on back together, returning to the group from our sound finding or whatever felt right to you in those moments. And we will just prepare to close this little sample experience of nature therapy, if you have any kind of beverage near you or a snack near you, now is a great time to have some of that, or to have some after this. Keeping yourself hydrated, especially as Dr. Kogan was mentioning earlier, oftentimes our indoor winter air is dry. And so I've prepared today this tea here, and it's got a little bit of a mostly yellowish, but a little bit greenish hue to it. This is actually newer for me. This one's made with some bits of a lemon tree, like one of my newer additions to my growing plant family at home. So the lemon tree, we know we can do stuff with the lemons, but we can also make a tea with petals of the flowers that fall down, because only a very small percentage of the flowers actually end up making fruits. So welcome you to have a sip of anything you might have near you now or after. And for anyone to share in the chat if they like, any final sharings of what you're noticing. There again, my name's Ilana Rubin. My practice is called Kindred Nature. In the chat here is my email address and my website and Instagram handle if you happen to be on there. And I will just close again with great warmth and gratitude for you all for welcoming me back here again, and wishing you all well. I'll hand it back to Janet and Dr. Kogan.
Thank you, Ilana. This was wonderful. I definitely enjoyed I moved to the bigger room. I have this great view of outside, so I enjoyed that. Well, we're gonna have a long weekend, so I hope you guys planning something outside. Get moving, spend quality time. It's not gonna be warm, but we'll see everybody next Friday, and stay safe, stay warm, stay healthy.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. I went and got my shell. I have lots of shells.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great